and you are watching episode 15 of the Life of JEM live video podcast. Still being filmed from my home in the Inland Empire. I'll be back in the studio soon. My producer, DJ April Duran, is here, I'll bet virtually, and I have a special virtual guest today. I'm so excited. She's a writer, a lawyer, and an author of the book, Are No Longer Babaylan. And her name is Elsa Valmidiano. So we're going to be writing with Elsa and her book, which is an amazing book. It's inspiring. It's a book of essays. I've read it twice now. And the thing I got from reading it twice is that the whole book is a rumination on loss and grief. And we're going to talk about that. And that's why this episode is called Writing Grief. And the first chapter of her book, it's actually an essay, is about her grandfather's death. And the first chapter of my memoir is about my father's death, the day he died. So I'm going to read this very short passage. It's an excerpt from the first chapter of my memoir. And then I'm going to intro Elsa and bring her in. You're going to love her. She's like Spitfire. So here's a short excerpt from my story, A Shit Day, that ran in the Inlandia Journal. And just to set it up, when this piece starts, the paramedics are working on my father, who's collapsed. He's on hospice and has pancreatic cancer. So here we go. A shit day. Why did I always focus on the bad stuff? Why hadn't I been to see my dad more often? What was I running from? Why was I trying to be someone else? A high-powered lawyer who never saw her family. Dad was always there for me, even if he was drunk. A drunk dad is better than no dad at all. I remember as a kid, Dad playing cards with me and my sisters when Mom had to work late at the restaurant. Dad would wake up early every weekend to make us pancakes with jelly inside. Bacon so crispy it would crumble in your mouth. Dad was always there. I jump back to the present as the paramedic looks at me and asks me again, "Shall we go on?" I look at him and say, "No." Later, I watch as they cover my father's body. It's quiet like in a church. My dad is gone. The word gone repeats in my head. I miss my dad's voice saying my name. And it's almost like I can still hear him. Am I imagining it, or is that his voice whispering my name in my ear? There is so much I still want to say to my dad. Shaking my head, I sigh and listen to my mom weeping. My twin sister Jackie is pacing outside, staring into the sky. We call my little sister Annie, and she's on her way back. The paramedics wheel my father's body out. My heart stops, or maybe it just breaks. Tears run down my face, and I wipe them away. I have so much regret, I can taste it. I fall into my head and go back. I have to figure out who I am and who do I want to become. Maybe I have to start at the beginning. That's my story. That's an excerpt, and then I go into my childhood stories. Now, it's kind of sad, but it took me years to write that story, years and years. My dad died over a decade ago. Now let me introduce my guest to get this amazing conversation going. Elsa Valmidiano is the author of Are No Longer, I'm going to say this right, Are No Longer Babaylan, her debut essay collection from New Rivers Press. Elsa is a recipient of their Editor's Choice selection from the 2018 Many Voices Project, a competition in prose. Her poetry and her prose have appeared or are forthcoming in various literary journals, including Mud Season Review, Yes, Poetry, Northridge Review, Anomaly, Cherry Tree, Tramp Set, and others. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Mills College and has performed in numerous readings. She is a Best of the Net and a Pushcart Prize nominee. You can go to her website, slicingtomatoes.com, which is on our banner. And on that website, Elsa showcases a directory of Filipina artists alongside her poetry and prose. Welcome, Elsa. Glad to have you. What a resume.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you for, thank you for that introduction.
Well, you're fantastic. Let's talk about how we met. We were just talking about this off air.
Yeah. So I was following you on Twitter when I was on Twitter. And one of the things that caught my eye was that you were an attorney and a writer. And I was like, wow, we have so much in common just in that alone. And so I started following you and reading your blog, Your Life in the Inland Empire, which I'm very familiar with. Not that I'm from there, but my sister went to UC Riverside. And so my best friend also lived out there for a little bit. And so I'm very familiar with the area. And so how we really, I think, got to talking with each other was that you had published this piece, I believe, in Mother Magazine. And it was about infertility and, failed IVFs. And I remember a line from that article where you had, just taken this, you bought a pregnancy test and you went into the Walmart bathroom. And one of the profound lines that just has stuck with me ever since was, "There are no atheists in Walmart bathrooms." And I was just like, damn. And I just, as you painted this picture of what it was like just being in that bathroom stall and really praying and hoping, like having this kind of spiritual experience in all places in a bathroom, in a public bathroom, it was just like, wow, I can really feel what you were feeling. And then so I remember I messaged you over that and we just started talking and then here we are, we're friends. So,
it really was kismet. We're both writers, we're both lawyers, we both have dealt with infertility. One of the stories in your essay collection that I love the most, that I've read numerous times, but it's always hard for me to read, is Blighted, about a blighted ovum experience that you had.
Right.
And that was my failed IVF, was a blighted ovum. And I had no idea what it was when it happened, but I miscarried at 10 weeks and thought I was having a baby. And, going to 10 weeks is pretty far into the pregnancy to miscarry,
Right. No, I totally can relate because I'm pretty sure I wrote this in the essay, but, we had been also at 10 weeks and I had never heard of, blighted ovum or anaembryonic pregnancy. I didn't even know that was really, a thing, because the way I imagined miscarriages was always also like always the expulsion of a fetus into, wherever, into a toilet, or, whether you're taking a shower or something, like it just dropped from your body. And there was no drop. And so I thought, and I'm sure you did too, like, oh, this is happening. Like the pregnancy is not dropping, it's carrying. And so, I undergoing that experience, it was, it was shocking. It was a learning experience. It sucks that had to be the learning experience. I'm sure you felt that way too.
Definitely.
And it was just I just remember being very surprised, because you go in with this expectation that everything's fine, and then you learn the scientific thing that you just, for me, I was just like, wait, what is that? Go home, Google it. What is this?
Yeah, and people don't talk about it is really the problem. And one of the reasons I wrote my story, Stalling, and I performed it at a theater in Burbank, was because I really wanted to demystify this concept. And women don't talk about being infertile. Women don't talk about the fact that your fertility drops off a cliff at 37, because we see all these women getting pregnant in their 40s. but it's usually through intervention after 40.
Yeah.
And it costs a lot of money. And my husband and I didn't even start trying till I was 36. And we'd been
Right.
together for years and years, decades. And so I think at that time we'd been together since we were 20, so 16 years when we started trying. And we always tried not to get pregnant. So I was like, we could have had fun all those years, right?
Yeah. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I actually, though, when I did have my miscarriage, that was through it was through a natural pregnancy. We actually didn't have intervention at all, like no IVF, no IUI. We conceived naturally. But yeah, it was pretty, I don't want to say devastating. I think that's the adjective that I'm expected to say. Yeah. From people who think about miscarriages, even for those who have experienced it. But I think for me, having gone through the experience, when I go through any experience that's very significant like that, my instinct is to write about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was actually your article that triggered me writing about it. If I like fairly think about it. And
you capture it so beautifully. Sorry to interrupt you, but you talk about what it's like. It's very clinical, when you're being examined and they put the wand inside of you. And I remember my very expensive Newport Beach doctor telling me very matter-of-factly, there's no heartbeat. And I was by myself in Newport. I had to drive home. I couldn't even drive. I think I sat in the parking lot and cried, and then calmed down, went to a coffee shop, calmed down, and drove home, and talking to my husband on the phone. And I was just so amazed at how matter-of-fact he was. I mean, it wasn't like nurturing, like, I'm sorry. It was just like, no, it's gone. You try again. And I was like, oh, no, I can't actually. I'm done. I was done. I was like, I can't, I can't go through that. I would say I was devastated. I had to reconcile my loss of what I expected my life to be. And it turned out okay,
Yeah. My doctor actually was super compassionate. She was very, very sweet.
Oh, she was a woman too, of course.
Yes. Yeah. She was very, very compassionate and very sweet. And I don't know what it is. I think I just went into my brain goes into legal mode sometimes. And I was very okay, well, if that's the case, then we need to do this, this, and this, immediately. I wasn't going to grieve. I think if I was going to grieve, I was going to do it at home with my husband, but I wasn't going to do it in the office. And so I just became very, I don't know if it's a defense mechanism, but it just became this very okay, so now we're going to do step B, C, D, and E, and, whatever we need to do next. In order to have a safe, D&C. Because I was very much can I get the D&C today then? Because if that is the case, then I don't want to go through medical issues that could be so much worse for me. I mean, I think when I look at it, how we write, briefs and stuff, and they're very, I don't know, dry. And not to say that the piece is dry. I think Blighted, the way I wrote it, has some sort of aesthetic to it, because you're writing about a painful experience, but because you are a literary artist, you really want to make sure those sentences stick, that you really want to pull your reader into your shoes and feel it. And that's a very difficult thing, because you're writing about something that is a painful experience, but at the same time, it's also art, the way you're presenting it. And I've been really surprised and moved by the reception of that essay, of other women coming forward, regardless of what ethnicity they are, and coming forward with their own stories. And I don't know, I guess I'm always shocked, because when I'm writing my stories, I write them, and I guess I'm just naive, thinking oh, no one's going to read this. No
Right.
one's going to connect to this, right? And then they do, and they have such a tremendous response. And, you know, I get DMs, I get texts, I get emails, and I'm really, really moved by their own stories of what we can exchange. And then I feel like then it becomes like a storytelling on both sides, not just me,
Yeah.
but I'm also listening.
Definitely. And I think you're opening up that dialogue, which is very important. And, you know, the thing is, I sometimes look at stories later and go, hey, did I write that? Wow, that's not too bad, right? And you're like, how did I write that? I go into, and we'll talk about our process later, but some of my best pieces just happen organically where I go into this almost trance-like state and can write it in one draft. And the harder ones are the ones that are like pulling teeth. And I have stories that come out both ways, but I wanted to talk about how when I was reading your book again, it was just so full of grief. Your first essay in the collection is called Wait, and it's about the death of your grandfather. Was it hard to write that essay, or did that come out easy?
That's an interesting story, the origin of Wait and why I wrote it. So this is the origin story of how I started writing that essay. So I didn't have any intention actually of ever writing about my grandfather's funeral, but you know how there's submission calls for journals and you see them, right? And you're going to submit to them.
Yeah.
And I saw a submission call, I believe it was in Creative Nonfiction magazine, and their theme for that call was Wait. And I know it was actually called Wait. That was the theme. And I know, isn't that cosmic? And so when I saw the call, it's so cosmic. And so when I saw the call, it immediately triggered me to think of my grandfather's funeral, because my grandfather's funeral, and just Ilocano funerals, you know, in general, it's all about the ritual of waiting. And I thought, oh my God, I have my essay. So then I started writing. And it actually started off as a flash piece. Can you believe it? It started off as like 1,000 words.
Wow.
And it was funny because when I had the 1,000 words, I thought, oh, I'm done. You know, I don't have anything else to say. And I had passed on the essay to my little sister, who I adore. You know, I adore her. I love her to pieces. And she started to help me put together a larger essay because it triggered her to remember memories of that time. And so she was able to give me pieces of that time, which I wasn't present for. So because I was in upstate New York, you know, going to law school, and when he was dying, I wasn't there. And so she became that person, that representative from that time where I wasn't present, and give me that information. And so in giving me that information, I think we even emailed about it. And, you know, my sister, she's very, very talented. She's an artist herself. And, you know, she's definitely a writer. And when she wrote this email to me, I just thought, gosh, her language alone is gorgeous. And so what I did is I took that information and, you know, transformed it into my own prose, and made it into the second person, actually very strategically. The reason I chose second person is because I really wanted a reader, regardless of whatever ethnicity they were, to really step into my shoes and really understand ritual. And that's why I put it in you.
That is so interesting because, you know, I always write in first, and I had not realized that you wrote it in second. And right now I see the you, and that is so interesting. And I just have a quick anecdote. Similarly, I have a story about my grandfather called Grandpa's House. And I was triggered to write that story after reading a piece in the New Yorker about a man who leaves his estate to his caretaker, who was a nurse. And she ends up giving it back to the family. And it was it just made me remember that my mom was the only sibling that really visited my grandfather in Norco, California. We'd go there every weekend. It was this ritual every weekend. And when he died, he left everything to my mom. and she split it between her 8 brothers. So it was like $10,000 each. And back then, $80,000 would have been like a small fortune. It would have paid off my parents' house. And she instead split it between all the siblings. And I think it's interesting that one word like wait or one story like mine can trigger this whole, this beautiful essay that you wrote. And you capture the dynamic of family in it and funerals. It's almost like a road trip. A funeral, you will see the family dynamics and all the eccentric nature of families. And there's always a cast of characters. And I just thought it was beautifully written.
Oh,
what does your family think about it? I know your sister, was your historian in some ways, but what did the rest of the family think? What did you have to run it by them, or?
That's a really interesting and complicated question. I don't discuss my writing with my family. I know. I
can learn something from you because I've had so much trauma from when my mom and my sisters may disagree with something, and it'll turn into these like fights and crying sessions. And maybe it's better to create separation. But go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I've been writing for such a long time, and very, very long, like, grade school. And it's, it's a gift. Like I didn't really see it as anything, it's just like something I did, not knowing, like, no, you have a gift, like this is a thing.
Yeah.
And so I've been writing for a very long time, and my younger sister has always been supportive. She's, also an artist though. So we've kind of been supportive of each other in that. But in terms of the storytelling and the writing, that's not something, I discuss with my family. I think when it comes to my family, because there's such painful issues that I feel need to be brought to light, especially within our culture where there's a lot of silencing and shaming. I think if I had died.
Oh, she froze.
She did.
Because then at that point, I think I would feel, I don't know, I would feel impeded. Like I wouldn't be able to actually write my story, because then I'd feel like someone's constantly looking over my shoulder. And I think when you write, I really feel like there's freedom there. And I think also when you're connecting to your readers who also have that same dynamic where they can't go to their families for certain reasons, that they will find a sanctuary in the storytelling.
Yeah.
And so that's how I approach things. It's a really complicated question. It really is.
It is. And I think every writer of memoir deals with this issue. And I think I need to put more separation myself. So I'm learning something today because there is a freedom in being able to tell your own truth, your own way, without censorship, without feeling like, because I always try to acknowledge when I don't know something, or when I'm not sure about something, or if something's how I feel like it could be like this, but I'm not completely sure. My memoir, my narrator is a little bit unreliable because she's kind of like a Sally J. Friedman when I was young. I always wanted to be like the center of attention. And so I'd create these dramatic episodes in my head. I remember one time my mom put me in my bedroom and I splashed water all over my face, and my friends were coming over to come get me, and I was like, she locked me in my room, and I'm like starting, like so much drama, like Letos, like who do you think you are? You think you're a movie star. And now this kind of makes sense, this podcasting thing, because I get to play it up. But yeah, I think it's really important as artists and writers of memoir that we acknowledge what we don't know, but that we also realize that sometimes perceptions differ. Yes. And my truth and my sister's truth and my mom's truth and my dad who's passed away, his truth are all going to be different. They are.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, when I do write about family, I never want to antagonize anybody. like, I know there's some very painful truths that I brought to light, especially in Wait, which is the opening essay. But I think it's not really a mechanism to judge family. It's not that at all. It's actually to be compassionate over how we behave when we grieve, because grieving demands our vulnerability. And because grieving demands vulnerability, I mean, you have to imagine for people who are not comfortable in being vulnerable, they might behave not in favorable ways necessarily. And there is nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly normal. And I want people to know, like, you know, when a family grieves, it's not going to be perfect. It's, you know, you're asking so much of a family and how they're going to behave. And so things come out. I mean, it can get pretty explosive. Maybe not for all families, but yeah, I mean, it really demands vulnerability that, you know, among individuals. And so sometimes we just might not act favorably during that time.
Yeah. And we have some comments. I'm just going to read them out loud so you can see what people are saying. They're really enjoying this conversation. Alex Barraza, who's an attorney I work with it. He's in criminal court, mental health court with me. Alex Barraza, you guys are amazing. Jocelyn Nguyen, yes, I really enjoyed reading the Filipino traditions in your book. It was relatable to my own family. And then Jen Meadows says, memory is so fluid, which is very true. And then Cindy Nessinger says, writing about trauma is hard. Thanks for asking uncomfortable questions. Yeah, it's hard. And, you know, we all approach it differently. And I think that for me, my favorite part of being a writer and why I started this podcast was because I met the most amazing people that just enveloped me and I trusted, and we opened up to one another, and there was this different relationship with writers as a community. And I just wanted to highlight people. You're an amazing person, an amazing writer.
You're amazing too.
Love. Hey, so you know, just really quick to end about our conversation on Wait. What I found really interesting were the parallels in our lives. You feel a lot of guilt in the essay about not being there when your grandfather passes because you're trying to finish your classes at law school. And I similarly, you know, almost didn't go home the day my dad died. I was at a big firm in San Francisco. I was a corporate lawyer at the time. And my husband, I had just been home for 2 weeks helping to take care of my dad on hospice. And they told me he had months left. And I wasn't going to go home. And my husband told me, you need to go this weekend. I don't care how much work you have to do. And he died that Saturday. And if I hadn't been there, I can't even imagine what would have happened, because it was a horrible day. But me and my sisters and my mom, we all needed to be there together when it happened, you know?
Yeah. I think one of the things about that time is that because I was in New York and, you know, all my family was in California. And I really did try getting home as quickly as possible.
I saw that.
And so I've always, my property law professor, who I was, you know, crying in her office. It just, oh, speaking of which, so this week actually is been 20 years. Wow. Yeah, since my grandfather died. So it's very weird and cosmic that we're having this conversation exactly like 20 years from when it happened. And so we are living actually now during the waiting period of what would have been the waiting period 20 years ago. So, but yeah, I remember really wanting to get home as soon as possible. And I felt like I was trying to be professional and, like, you know, talk to all of my professors. And it was my property law professor, who I will never forget, her compassion, and just, you know, she's a phenomenal lady. She was, you know, she sat me down, and it was so different because in class, you know, when we're doing the Socratic method, she was just so stern and, you know, not, you know, I wouldn't say compassionate, but it's just like very, very professional. And so when I sat in her office, I remember crying, and she was just different. Like, she was so nice. And she was like, you know, you don't have to go and see every professor and tell them. Like, what you can do is you can go to the dean and they will, let your professors know, so you can just go home. You can drop everything and you can go home. And it was so comforting to hear that kind of permission, because I think, when you're that young too, in an industry where it's all business, it was so nice to have that interaction with her, and giving me permission to say, we're human. We can grieve. We're not robots. We can feel. We go home. Yeah, and I will never forget.
And we can take off that suit, literally and figuratively. And the thing, my dad's death, he gave me permission to dream again and be my creative self. When he died, I left my husband in San Francisco, who was in dental school. I left the big firm. I came to California and lived in Colton with my twin sister. We fought like cats and dogs. But I went to another firm. But after a year, I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I would rather not practice law than do law that I knew the first day it was not the field for me. And then when I came to the public defender's office, I knew the first day I was in the right place. So I think that, my dad was a dreamer. He was always chasing windmills. He owned a bar. My parents had nothing as far as financially, but he had this dream to own a bar and he did it. And so I think that, death can sometimes also teach us these lessons.
Right.
That be yourself, be who you want to be. I always felt like I was trapped when I was at the corporate law firm. I chose this life. I need the money. I got to pay off my student loans. But then when my dad died, I just said, I don't give a shit anymore. I'm going to be who I want to be and hell be damned,
Yeah. I think for me, it was, so there's after the funeral.
Yeah.
Which is the rape. Piece. Yeah. And it actually originally was part of Wait. And actually that piece was really the hardest thing I ever wrote in my life.
I can see why, but it's beautifully done, but horrific, right?
Yeah. So when I look back on that, I had never, ever discussed it with anybody, not even my closest girlfriends, like never, ever talked about that time. And so when I wrote it, I really had to dig inside my memory and conjure it. And it was actually originally part of Wait, the first essay, but I ended up taking it out and made it its own essay and then actually set it, apart, because just aesthetically, I realized like I was taking away the spotlight from my grandfather and I wanted the spotlight to be on him. Yeah. And so I removed that section and I made it its own. And then what happens to that first section, to, part one of the collection, if anyone ever wants to dig really deep about like, what is Elsa doing here, like artistically, is that I wanted to start with, the death of this beloved family member. And then the second essay is actually about my maternal grandparents and about the last moment they had together before my maternal grandfather died, because he died at 28, so I never met him. And then the third essay, which is about, rape, sexual assault with an intimate partner, it's a different kind of dying. Yeah. So you have all these parts that have to do with death, but with the last part with, rape with an intimate partner, to me, it's a type of spiritual death, but then there's a reclamation and a resurrection out of that happens after the funeral. And it only it's like triggered because of the death of a beloved family member. And then, the narrator then realizes her worth. And so that's how that first section all ties together. So,
wow. I love how you reclaim that, because, as a survivor myself, these are stories I haven't written, may never write. And, they're too painful. And, I really admire. And I did notice in your book, your separations and how you structured everything. And I thought it was just so fluid and artistically done. And, your quotes, the titles, everything in this essay collection is inspiring to me, because I'm working on an essay collection right now, along with my memoir. And I think that it just goes to show that these genres, right? Memoir, essay collection, they're really one and the same. as far as how you can play with them. And I think that reclaiming your identity and reclaiming your worth is a great lesson to take away from your whole book.
Yeah. Like I had arguments with myself about why I put the funeral piece first, because it is very heavy. It starts off like we're gonna just dive in.
Oh, it's perfect though. I love it.
Yeah,
first.
I mean the way I see it is, I think in our Western society, death is seen as the end, but I don't see it that way. I see it as a beginning, and that's why I wanted to start there.
Well, that is so prescient, because what I say at the end of my chapters, I'm going to go back to the beginning. When my dad dies, that's the impetus for my next chapters to go back to childhood and try to hear him. I write to hear my father's voice. I say this a lot. I started writing to hear him, because when I hear him, when I write, I hear him. And I've had a psychic say he's over my shoulder watching me. And I really, truly believe that our elders are there. And my father knows I'm writing about him and knows I'm sorry that I never said everything I should have said. He would always tell me, you're going to regret it one day, Jenny, when I'm gone. And he's right. And I'm like, oh, how dare you be right about that, Dad? Because I regret it. I was not grateful. I was not always loving. I was not always kind. But I can be kind in my writing now. Not that I show him as perfection. He's not. He is a chasing windmills, a very flawed, addictive, drunk, alcoholic, but loving father. But I can show that I love him through my prose. It doesn't have to be, I don't have to have a negative tone. It's always loving. Even showing his faults, it's loving, right?
Well, I think what's what we're talking about here is just like the magic of writing, because I feel like when we're writing, especially about our, beloveds that have passed on, we're conjuring, Yeah. It's magical. I mean, it's not magical like Harry Potter. That's not like, it's a different kind of magical where the writing actually conjures them as if they are still here. And it's kind of frightening, because when I do write about my grandfather, so I'm writing another essay and he also appears in this other essay, it's like he's still here. And it's like that moment literally just happened yesterday. It's like there's no time lapse. So I think, like my title, I call it We Are No Longer Babaylan, because the Babaylan, just to give you some background, were the high priestesses that comprised of women and gender fluid individuals that existed before Spanish colonization came in, violently took over, restructured society. And so we have these rituals that are, surreptitiously hidden in these religious practices that we do today. Wow. And so it's a question of, how do the descendants of these high priestesses, how do they operate today in the diaspora? And there are still Babaylan that are in the Philippines that are rigorously trained, that go through the instruction. And I don't want to insult them at all. I wouldn't say that I myself am a Babaylan, because I am not trained as one. If I've observed any kind of ritual, it's an observation, but it hasn't been like a lesson or instruction that's formal. And so it really becomes a question of, we are no longer Babaylan. Are we? Are we not? Where are we? So
I love magic because, I was a Wiccan in high school. I still consider myself somewhat of a witchy poo, and I love anything mystical and cosmical. It's why I love David Bowie. And Susie Sue, the ultimate witch. But do you want to read a passage? Because I don't know how many of my questions I'm going to get through, but I want you to read a passage. Because I could talk forever. I might have to have you on again. I want you to
we can talk. Oh, we can talk for 5 hours.
We could go till midnight.
we totally could. It's kind of scary that we could.
But I really want people to hear your beautiful, lyrical, insightful prose, and you're such an amazing writer. Do you mind reading 2 to 3 minutes of something?
Yeah, I do have something set aside. So just to give you some background, because 20 years ago, it was, the death of my grandfather. And so I am going to be reading from Wait. And I'm going to be reading the section because it's about my sister turning 21 during this week. So it's like a week of mourning. And then also to have this milestone 21st birthday, which I'm sure sticks in her memory today. It sticks in mine for sure. And so I'm going to delve into that piece really. And it's really for her because, I love her to pieces and for me. On the same night, it had been his wife's and youngest grandchild's birthday. So it was also my grandmother's birthday because they have the same birthday. His wife, 87, the youngest grandchild, 21. You had celebrated his 90th birthday just a little bit over a month ago, when everyone thought he would live until 100. He was still farming everyone's yards, collecting his recycling, and selling his lemons in the parking lot of Seafood Ranch Market. His wife's and youngest grandchild's birthday were a day apart, but they were still known as the birthday twins, as the day fell on the same day when you considered the international time zone continuum. When it was Wednesday in the old country, it was Tuesday in the adopted one, when the youngest grandchild had been born. Thus, the same birthday. She would not only share the same birthday with his wife, but she would be the sole heir to his ears. They were not necessarily big, but they protruded, accentuating her already gorgeous face, the way his own ears had accentuated his handsome face when he was young. She was also the only American-born grandchild. When he was 11 and receiving an education from the school the Americans had set up in his barrio, did he ever dream that one of his grandchildren might be born in the adopted country? The youngest grandchild had turned 21, a milestone age most people can't wait to turn, the legal age to drink and party the night away. There was no wild drinking that night, but you still might have called what you did partying the night away, in a different way. The youngest grandchild had spent the earlier part of the evening stringing in memoriam tags to 90 lemons. It had been her brilliant idea to give them away as favors at the funeral, something her Lilong would have done himself, as lemons were one of his more popular and successful fruits he sold in the parking lot of Seafood Ranch Market. Before the birthday cake was brought out and before anyone could sing happy birthday, your grandmother noticed her children's heads uncovered. She reprimanded each of them, demanding that their heads be covered in black veils out of respect for him. Everyone, children, spouses, and grandchildren, must wear black tulle veils and wear black for an entire year. But you are told you are exempt from this rule, being part of the younger generation raised in this adopted country. You, your siblings, and cousins wear black anyway. You choose to wear black for 30 days after the funeral. As your parents, aunts, and uncles donned black tulle veils like bonnets with the ends tied under their chins, you remember black and white photographs of funerals in the old country, of everyone, men, women, and children, donning black veils in bonnet fashion. Agpanis. You remember old photographs of a younger grandfather standing alongside other family members beside the coffin of an unknown ancestor, each mourner having one end of their veils held between their lips. You did not know why. You had asked your aunt, your grandfather's eldest daughter, but she only replied, "That's just what they did." You wanted to know why they did. Both your parents could not recall ever placing the veil in their mouths, a practice so ancient that it had now fallen away with your parents' generation, though the last time they claimed to be witnesses to the practice was when they were children themselves, the practice performed by elders at funerals in the Ilocos. Your mother explains the symbol of teeth in dreams. Teeth falling out in dreams meant the imminent death of a family member. She and you could only surmise that the veil biting might symbolize the clenching onto life literally within one's teeth while keeping death at bay, as family members were required to clothe their heads with death itself in honor of their deceased loved one. It's then you are schooled on the rituals that you must follow during the waiting. Motherland rituals that have now been reduced to superstition in the adopted country, as your ancestral practices are suddenly equated to black cats and broken mirrors.
Ooh. What a great last line. Black cats and broken mirrors. I love that line. I was writing some down. Keeping death at bay, clothe their heads with death. I mean, just this, that's why we titled this episode Writing Grief, because you capture it. And we're almost out of time. I can't believe it. I'm going to have you back on. But a couple things. First, I have to give away a t-shirt. And this is the Life of JEM t-shirt. And Elsa, I'll send you one too. I'll get your address and send you one. So if anyone knows the answer to this trivia question, the first person who puts it in the comment box, I quoted in my blog this week, what nature-obsessed writer said we live lives of quiet desperation? Who said that? What nature-obsessed writer said we live lives, most people live lives of quiet desperation? So I also want to note that we had a death last week of an Inland Empire African-American writer, Selena Diana Bumpus. She was an amazing activist and writer and teacher in the community. She worked with the elderly at the senior center. So I just want to also say in this episode about grief that we grieve you, Selena, and we miss you. So if we want to bring Elsa back in really quick, Elsa, do you want to tell people how they can buy your amazing book that I'm going to pronounce right? We Are No Longer Babaylan. Did I say it right?
Babaylan.
Babaylan.
Yes.
Yay! Yay! So, Amazon, or how can they get it?
I actually have preferred bookseller links on my website, which is screening at the bottom there, slicingtomatoes.com. So you can buy it at Bookshop. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble. You can buy it at Thrift Books. So, or you can buy it from me if you want a nice little message. You can go to my contact page on slicingtomatoes.com. There's a PayPal button there. My Venmo handle is also there. And I will definitely mail it to the reader personally with a nice little personalized message.
And that is the best. Because I know so many writers now, I collect my signed copies. And like I was telling Elsa before we started, I take my books into the bathtub and stuff. So sometimes whatever they wrote will be like kind of smeared, but it doesn't matter because it's love for these books. I love books. I love writers. I love you, Elsa.
Oh, I love you too.
I knew this was going to be fun. And hopefully one day maybe you can come visit and come live after all this COVID stuff is over.
Absolutely.
I would love to have you in studio. We have a winner chicken dinner, Hanaveva, in Hawaii, Molokai. Shout out, aloha. I stayed at her house in Molokai before. Hanaveva and I met through Vona. She just won a Life of JEM t-shirt. So I'll send you a text or a message and get you that. Yay! So thank you, Elsa. Thank you, DJ, producer April. I'm going to take a little hiatus for about 3 weeks, but check out my Life of JEM Facebook page for my next episode. Guest will be announced. I have a couple people set up, but I had to move some dates around because of spring break and because I'm getting my vaccine shot. So thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Elsa. Buy her book. Go to her website, slicingtomatoes.com. Her book it's such a beautiful cover. Who did the cover?
It's a Manila-based artist. Her name is Isabel Francisco. And we became friends, actually through friends of friends. I've known her for a long time, but I've always loved her art. And I remember seeing this piece, which actually the title of the painting is called Engine. And I was like, that is going to be the cover. Like it just is. It speaks so much to the title.
It's beautiful. I mean, I just love it. I love the colors too. This
Yeah.
whole like the
I like
blues.
the disappearing face, and the mouth actually is disappearing, which, you know, to me speaks so much about like we're kind of disappearing but also reclaiming. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, let's dance it out. Thanks for coming on. We're going to have you on
Thank
again because
you.
we didn't even get through half my question.
Okay.
And we'll talk off air a little bit more. But thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.